Just transition is a phrase which continues to be used by government and activists when it comes to becoming more environmentally sustainable. However, on the number of occasions I've spoken on the matter, I believe our transition is absolutely unjust. Just last week we saw the latest contradiction put forward by government. On the one hand, the government pressed ahead with increases in the excise duty on petrol and diesel, and then, on the other hand, a government agency, the National Transport Authority, released proposals to discourage people from using the Rosslare to Dublin rail line. And I spoke previously in the House with regards to hydrogenated vegetable oil fuel, the possibilities of exploring this as an alternative for motorists, for delivery companies, haulage companies, and all those companies who need to use a lot of fuel. And the problem with the government's approach is that they are penalising people for using petrol and diesel consistently with excise duty increases. We saw a rise last week. We'll see more in the coming months, as was confirmed today by Minister McGrath, both in excise duty and carbon tax. But these penalties are coming before viable alternatives are in place. We can talk about electric cars all we want, but sales are slow in County Corla. Our depots across Europe are now full with electric cars that can't be sent anywhere because nobody wants them. And the second-hand market for electric cars is almost non-existent. People will spend a lot of money on them, and they're not even sure about how much they will be worth when it comes to doing a trade. There are still outstanding questions about what happens to the electric car after its life is over. What carbon emissions are produced in the manufacturing of that electric car? But the problem with the government's approach to this and many other things is trying to run before you can walk. The alternatives, County Corla, must be in place, and they must be feasible alternatives for it to be a just transition. And I was one of only about 12 TDs in this House who voted against the Climate Action Bill. And the reason I did so was because I know that the government's current approach is ultimately not going to have the impact it was intended for. And if we look at farming, for which the Minister is here, and the context of it, infrastructure, climate and the Nature Fund Bill, it's important to note that farmers continue to be restricted in their work about what they can do, when they can do it, how they can do it, how much of it they can do, and a whole raft of different regulations curtailing their business are in place, much of it handed down to us by our European Union masters. What goes unrecognised is that Ireland is one of the what goes recognised is that Ireland is one of the most efficient and greenest from an emissions point of view. Food sources that we deliver dictate that. But if we decide to penalise farmers and put further difficulties upon them, they will respond by going out of business, producing less. And what will happen as a result is that we will need to import more food products from countries who do it less efficiently. And I think that will happen this year, County Corla, because we have yet to sow potatoes. We should be incentivising increased production here in Ireland, Minister, and ensuring that the farmers of Ireland have a future. We see, with the weather in recent weeks, the challenges facing farmers and the supports that will be needed by them. We also need to prioritise our tree planting. Targets have consistently been missed over the last few years. The licensing system hasn't been working as well as it should have been, and overall the benefits provided by planting trees are not being adequately focused on. For example, the independent report that in 2022, just 2,273 hectares of new forestry was planted, which is less than a third of the 8,000 hectares that the government pledged to plant each year. We're not getting the basics right and focusing too much on punishing people. We know the benefits that forestry bring, and yet we can't get it right. We also need to get our public transport system sorted out. The number of towns where the main bus stop is a long walk away from the main train station, where there's very little link-up between buses and trains. We don't even have a train or a metro of any kind of railway near our airports. Moving on, the latest measure, the plastic bottle deposit scheme. In theory, the plastic bottle return is not necessarily a bad idea, Count Corla, but it clearly wasn't in practice. It clearly wasn't in practice where I have, sorry, it was clearly not in practice, and I have seen people in supermarkets bringing in bags full of plastic bottles, going over to the machine, putting in a few of them, and then the machine starts to reject the others, and they end up having to take them home. And whatever we expect is going to be the case in the future, this is costing people 25 cents a bottle. Ultimately, that's not going to bode well in the future. But when people are asked in opinion polls, and when I'm speaking to people, their main priorities do not seem to be the same as the government's main priorities. The government are out of touch. People want government to be succeeding on housing, on healthcare, getting to grips on immigration and the cost of living. And I wish, as of yesterday, Taoiseach Harris the best of luck in his role and the new ministers in their portfolios. But I do hope that it will mark change in the approach and a change in focus for the government, because up until now there has been far too much imposing taxes on people with very little change. Thank you.